never thought Dad would ask me to keep quiet that night, but there he was, leaning against the wooden beam in the backyard pavilion, arms folded and eyebrows raised. He said, "Emily, don't ruin this," in that low, steady voice he uses when he's serious. We were standing under strings of warm lights at my older brother's wedding reception, just hours after I'd secretly texted the band with a special request. The crisp summer air smelled faintly of jasmine and fresh-cut grass. My heart pounded, partly from nerves and partly from excitement. I'd been planning this surprise for weeks, hoping Dad wouldn't catch on until the very last moment all week. I'd been sneaking glances at the playlist the band sent over, scanning song titles for the code name I used in my note, Golden Hour Melody. My real choice was Landslide by Fleetwood Mac, the song Dad would probably never admit he loved. He always pretended it was too sentimental, but I knew how his eyes glistened when he thought no one was looking. As I watched guests laughing and dancing under the lantern glow, I felt a knot in my stomach. What if the band forgot? What if Dad walked away when the slower tune started? I took a slow breath of sweet iced tea and smiled to hide my jitters, determined the night would go exactly as I'd imagined. I slipped away from Dad's side and approached Marcus, the drummer. His dark, curly hair was damp from the heat, and he gave me a subtle nod as I passed him the folded note. The band was mid-set, belting out an upbeat cover with horns and tambourines. No one paid me any mind. I watched Marcus unfold the paper carefully, then clap his sticks together with a grin. I excused myself and drifted back toward my brother and his new wife. The toast had ended, and people swirled glitter confetti into the air, celebrating with shouts and cheers. Moment by moment, the night felt charged with possibility. Dad caught me again near the food table, balancing strawberry shortcake on a delicate plate. He frowned but didn't scold me this time. "Be careful," he murmured, voice softer. "I don't want you digging up old memories." My chest tightened. I'd spent months trying to honor our old family dance nights without dredging up painful echoes of Mom's absence. She'd passed away a year ago, and Dad had worked so hard to make tonight perfect. I gave him a quick hug, then backed away. His cologne, cedarwood and citrus, lingered in the midsummer breeze. The band wrapped up their next song and paused to survey the crowd. I felt a lump in my throat as Dad scanned the dance floor, looking pleased. I held my breath, clutching my clutch purse as I climbed onto a folding chair near the stage. Whispering to myself, I begged the song gods to let this work. Then Marcus tapped the cymbal softly, and the rest of the group launched into the gentle opening guitar arpeggio of Landslide. The strings rang out crystal clear, and a hush fell over the guests. My pulse spiked, and I leaned forward, watching Dad's expression as the melody wove through the night air. Dad's eyes widened in recognition, and he froze mid-step. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, and all I could hear was his breath. "Hitch." Near us, my brother mouthed, "Is that her song?" The bassist strummed the familiar chords, and I felt tears prick my eyelids. The singer's voice floated soft and warm over the mic. I slid down from the chair and moved closer to Dad, reaching for his hand. Our fingers brushed, and he looked at me with a swirl of pride, surprise, and something I couldn't name. The music carried us back to summers spent dancing barefoot in the living room, Mom smiling at us from the kitchen doorway. Tears spilled down Dad's cheeks as he gripped my hand tighter. Guests stopped milling about, drawn into the songs. Bittersweet beauty. I felt a lump in my throat, too, but forced a steady smile. The next verse drifted over the night like a whispered secret, and Dad's shoulders relaxed. He caught my gaze and offered a small, broken smile. I realized then that I hadn't ruined anything. Instead, I'd given him something precious, a fleeting moment of joy and remembrance. The guitar solo echoed across the pavilion as I squeezed his hand, watching him release the grief he'd tucked away for so long. When the final chord rang out, the crowd erupted into applause and cheers. The band members took a bow, and Marcus winked at me before nodding toward Dad. My father stood slowly, wiping his cheeks with a handkerchief. Then he did something I never expected. He walked toward the center of the dance floor and held out his hand for me. Emboldened, I slid into his embrace, and we danced together under the glowing lights as our family circled around us. Laughter and music swirled in harmony. In that moment, I understood the words he'd whispered earlier. He'd worried I might ruin everything, but far from ruining the night, I'd helped heal part of our hearts. As we danced, Dad leaned down and whispered, "Thank you." His voice trembled slightly, and I nodded, feeling tears blur my vision. The band launched into a livelier tune, and guests began to join us on the floor. I looked up at the stars peeking through the vines overhead and felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. The evening had been more magical than I ever dared hope. Dad had been right to worry. I had the power to change the mood of the night. But I'd also discovered the power of music and memory to bring us back together. And in the glow of those string lights, I finally felt like everything was going to be okay. The morning after the wedding, I woke to pale sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains. my head buzzing with the echoes of the previous night's melody. I lay still for a moment, tracing the outline of the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me, remembering how Dad's hand had felt so warm and steady in mine. There was a softness in the memory that both comforted and unsettled me, comforted because we'd shared a rare moment of vulnerability, unsettled because I knew healing was rarely linear. As I slipped out of bed, I sent a quick text to Marcus, thanking him again for keeping my surprise flawless. His reply, a simple thumbs up, made me smile. I dressed in jeans and a light blouse, then wandered downstairs to find Dad at the kitchen island, sipping black coffee and reading the morning paper. He looked up, offering a gentle nod. I poured myself a cup of tea and joined him in silence, savoring the quiet promise of a new day. Over breakfast, my phone buzzed with messages from wedding guests posting photos of Dad and me dancing under the lanterns. My cheeks warmed as I scrolled through snapshots, my father's soft grin, my own eyes glistening, the band's drummer caught mid-wink. I hesitated before resharing one to my Instagram, captioning it simply, "Moments to Remember." Then set my phone aside. Dad cleared his throat, glancing at the plate of scrambled eggs between us. "You know," he began, voice measured, "I've been thinking. Your mom would have loved to see you both up there together." The words landed like stones in my stomach. I tried not to dwell on Mom's absence at the wedding, determined to make the day about celebration, not loss. But Dad's quiet admission cracked open something inside me. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Me too," I whispered. By mid-afternoon, I needed fresh air. I slipped into my sneakers and headed toward the neighborhood park where I used to jog with Mom when I was in high school. The path wound through towering oaks and wildflower patches that buzzed with bees. I tried not to dwell on how empty it felt running alone, without her laughter echoing beside me, but memories fluttered unbidden, Mom calling my name back then, hair tousled by the breeze, her freckles illuminated by sunbeams. I breathed deeply, feeling the ache of missing her, but also a strange thrill of independence. I reached the small gazebo where Dad and I had shared iced coffees last summer, my plan to surprise him still fresh in my mind. I wondered if he'd come here today, too, to relive fragments of the past. Later that evening, the phone rang, my brother, sounding both excited and nervous. "Hey, Em," he said. "We're thinking of moving into that old Victorian on Maple Street. You know, the one with the wraparound porch?" I frowned. The house had always seemed too big, too creaky for comfort. "Isn't that place a fixer-upper?" I asked. "Dad wants to take on a renovation project, something meaningful, he says, to honor Mom's memory." His words hit me like a punch. I sat on the stoop, heart racing. Renovating a family home sounded like a beautiful idea, but I feared it might reopen wounds Dad and I were only just closing. "I'll help," I cooked up, though uncertainty churned in my belly. My brother sounded relieved. "Perfect. Let's meet there tomorrow morning." We hung up, and I stared at the sky, as if it could offer guidance. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in bed, thinking about Dad's plan to transform the Victorian, the way each creak and crack would need mending. I pictured peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards, windows painted shut, the scent of old wood and damp plaster. It felt symbolic, repairing the old house to create a new foundation for our family's future. But I worried about reopening old sorrows, exposing memories better left at rest. Still, I knew I couldn't back out. If Dad believed in this project, I owed him my full support. I whispered into the darkness, "Let's rebuild," and drifted off with a steady resolve enveloping me like a quilt. The next morning, Dad and I arrived at the Victorian together. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the unkempt lawn. The front steps sagged, some boards rotten through, and the paint was faded and chipped. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and a few stray beams of light revealed swirls of peeling wallpaper and pastel florals. I ran my hand over a warped banister, heart pounding. Dad watched me, his expression earnest. "I want this to be a place we build together," he said softly. "A tribute to her." I nodded, swallowing hard. Standing in that echoing hallway, I felt a surge of purpose and anxiety in equal measure. Each room beckoned with possibility and pain. I gripped Dad's arm, silently promising to help him breathe new life into these walls. By late afternoon, we had stripped wallpaper from the foyer, revealing old plaster and wood lath beneath. Dad worked beside me, his movements deliberate and careful. At one point, he paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked at me with a vulnerability I hadn't seen since the wedding. "It's harder than I thought," he admitted. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll take it one room at a time," I said. He nodded, offering a small, grateful smile. As I scraped at the last stubborn piece of paper, I felt a kinship with the old house, both of us scarred, both in need of renovation. Together, we'd turn something neglected into something beautiful again. And maybe, along the way, we'd find a way to live with the memory of Mom without fear. Over the following months, Dad and I transformed the old Victorian into something that finally felt like home. Each Saturday morning, we arrived at the worksite before sunrise, hauling tools and paint cans across the overgrown lawn. Inside, the air smelled of plaster dust and fresh primer. We tore down the last of the old drop ceilings in the kitchen and exposed the original tin tiles, carefully sanding away decades of grime until the metal gleamed. I installed new shaker-style cabinets painted the pale green Mom loved so much. And Dad built an island topped with butcher block, its corners sanded smooth by our combined effort. In the study, we laid hardwood floors salvaged from a local reclamation yard, their worn edges reminding me of Mom's favorite reading nook at our old house. With every nail and brush stroke, we felt her presence guiding our hands. One afternoon. As I sanded the hallway banister to its honeyed sheen, Dad called me over with a grin. "Look what I found under this loose plank," he said, holding up a small, tarnished locket. He pried it open to reveal Mom's tiny wedding portrait, her bright eyes frozen in a moment of pure joy. I traced the delicate gold engraving, our family initials entwined inside a heart, and felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. "I didn't know this was here," Dad whispered. We sat on the dusty floor, the locket passing between us, and talked about the day he gave it to her, about how her laughter had filled their first apartment even when money was tight. In that shared silence, we both realized that this house held more than memories, it held the legacy of their love, and now it would hold our future. By midsummer, the exterior was nearly complete. We scraped away peeling paint from the siding, and repainted the trim in crisp white. The front door, once faded and chipped, now gleamed a buttery yellow, the same shade as Mom's favorite lipstick, and Dad installed a new brass knocker shaped like a rose. I planted lavender and herbs along the walkway, interspersing them with small solar lanterns that would glow softly at night. When the landscaping was done, we stood back and took in the view, the Victorian's tall windows framed by lush green vines, the porch swing Dad had built, and the string lights I'd draped overhead to recreate the magic of the wedding night. It was as if the house had been waiting for us to bring it back to life. Inside, the final touches were a labor of love. We hung brass sconces in the hallway, their soft light reflecting off the restored crown molding. I found a vintage Persian rug at an estate sale. Mom had always dreamed of owning one, and rolled it out in the living room, the reds and blues picking up the warmth of the hardwood floors. In the kitchen, Dad installed open shelving and I stacked our mother's china, the delicate floral patterns looking right at home. We framed her handwritten recipes and hung them on the wall next to the spice rack she'd always insisted be organized alphabetically. Each room felt like a chapter of her story, carefully preserved yet open to new memories. The day we finally moved in, our whole family gathered for a small housewarming. The dining room table, sanded and refinished by Dad, bowed slightly under the weight of dishes, roasted chicken, garden salad, fresh-baked bread. I brought out Mom's cranberry relish recipe, and Dad toasted her memory, raising a glass of sparkling cider. We laughed as we shared stories, Dad's improvised guitar serenade on our first family camping trip, my toddler self dancing around the living room to cheesy pop songs. The house echoed with the same kind of warmth Mom had always fostered, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the work we'd done together. That evening, after the guests had gone, Dad and I lit candles in the windows and settled on the porch. Swing with cups of hot tea. Fireflies drifted through the lavender, and the string lights cast a gentle glow over our faces. "I couldn't have done this without you," Dad said, voice thick with emotion. I reached out and squeezed his hand. "We did this together," I whispered. He nodded, eyes bright. "She would have been proud," he said, and I felt a familiar ache and a comforting warmth all at once. A few nights later, I surprised Dad again, this time with a playlist of songs Mom loved, queued up on the old stereo we'd repaired and set on a shelf in the study. I led him into the living room, where I'd pushed aside the coffee table to clear space. The gentle opening chords of Fleetwood Mac's Landslide drifted into the night. I offered him my hand, and he took it, pulling me close as the music floated through the newly painted walls. We danced barefoot on the soft rug, just as we had under the wedding lanterns, and I felt the entire house breathe with us. In that moment, Dad leaned his head on my shoulder and said, "Thank you for not letting me give up on this place." I rested my cheek against his hair, listening to the singer's voice rise and fall. "Thank you for teaching me how to build something beautiful," I replied. The song ended, but neither of us moved. Outside, the summer night held a steady hush, broken only by the distant chirp of crickets. Standing there in the glow of the lamp, I realized that we had done more than renovate a house. We had rebuilt our hearts around the memory of someone we loved and created a space where her spirit could live on, not as a ghost of grief but as a guiding light. The Victorian, once tired and forlorn, now shimmered with possibility. Just like that first slow dance under the wedding lights, it had become a symbol of healing, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. And so, every afternoon when the sun casts warm patterns through the bay window, I sit in the study with a cup of tea and Mom's locket on my desk, its gold edges worn smooth by time. I look around at the shelves lined with her books, the soft rug under my feet, and the front door painted in her perfect yellow smile. I know she's here, in every color choice, every tapering banister, every shared laugh with Dad. This house is our legacy, a harmony of past and present, and in its walls, we carry her love forward into all the tomorrows to come.